I don't know about you, but I've always had a passion for animals and nature, especially jungles. So, in this video, I decided to try and create my own little slice of jungle that I can watch grow and flourish. However, this is by no means a tutorial, as this is the first time I've ever tried a project like this. So, let's get right into it.
I started out by taking some measurements of the glass, and then with a felt tip pen, marking out the lines where I wanted to cut it. And then, scoring it, applying even downward pressure with the glass cutter. I proceeded to break the glass on the line by aligning it on the edge of the table. I repeated this for all the cuts I needed to make. I then sanded down the edges of the glass to remove any sharp edges. After this, I siliconed the tank using tape for clean beads, but unfortunately the footage corrupted, so I can't really show you that process. I proceeded to designing the background using cork bark to create mini planters and using driftwood to create a sort of canopy towards the top of the terrarium. I then used expanding foam to secure all the decor pieces. I applied it making sure to leave enough room at the bottom for the substrate as to avoid any of the foam from becoming mouldy later on. I left the foam to cure for a few hours. Once it was fully cured, I began to cut it down to my desired shape by using a kitchen knife to remove excess. Once I had carved it to a shape that I liked, I took it outside and began to apply silicone, making sure to cover all the foam before applying cocoa fibre and firmly pushing it down. I repeated until all of the background was covered in cocoa fibre. I decided to use a piece of one of the branches that I'd snapped off earlier to create a root going from the background towards the front. I think it adds more depth to the tank. I then sprayed down the tank to remove any loose cocoa fibre before siliconing the front two panes of glass down, again using tape to have clean beads where necessary.
For quite a while I was struggling to think of a way to attach this front pane of glass to the tank so it could be used as a door. But after some careful consideration, I think I have a solution that should work. I'm going to cut a piece of wood like this in half and silicone half of it to the glass, half of it to the tank. Then by attaching both of them to some hinges, I should be able to open it without any issues. However, I'm also going to have to create some supports here, which means that I can create a shell of plywood around the tank, which should help conceal the ugliness of the expanding foam.
To create these supports, I used scrap wood that I had lying around. I took some measurements and then cut it to size using a miter saw. proceeded to glue smaller wooden dowels onto the sides of these supports for the door to rest on. I wiped away the excess glue and clamped them down and allowed the glue to cure overnight. I drilled a small hole into the door to implant a magnet to act as a locking mechanism. I repeated this for the side of the terrarium. I then proceeded to paint all the wood and silicone the supports to the terrarium, which I clamped down to let them cure overnight. To cover up the sides, I decided to use the back of a cheap picture frames as it could be easily cut and painted. Once measurements had been taken and I had cut it to size, I applied silicone and clamped it overnight to cure. The next day I painted all the sides with wood paint. I measured out more wood to brace the top and bottom of the tank, then cut it to size and sanded it, then painted it. By this time, my dad needed to use a silicone gun, so I was forced to manually squeeze out the silicone. I again wiped away excess. At this point, I moved on to the canopy. I again took measurements and cut the wood to size, before gluing and clamping it overnight. I reused leftover picture frame backing to make a roof, and then I glued in supports to add some strength. I then sanded down the entire canopy using a mouse sander, before filling any imperfections and letting it cure and resanding it. I drilled a hole in the back for the light and ventilation. I repainted the canopy and I painted the inside white to reflect as much light to the plants as possible. To attach the door, I'm using brass hinges, which I aligned and marked pre-drill holes to prevent the wood from cracking. I proceeded to screw in the hinges. However, one of the screws I used must have been a little too long, as it caused the grass to crack, meaning I had to redo the entire door. Once redone, I carefully screwed the hinges in and proceeded to fill any little imperfections and then repainted them. I thoroughly cleaned both sides of the door and vacuumed all the debris away.
Now that I finally have all the exterior attached, I can finally move on to the interior. But before doing so, there's a few things I'd like to address. One of which is the door. The magnets that I had originally planned weren't strong enough and the wood didn't go close enough to hold them together. But fortunately, the wood on the door catches on this piece and stops the door from swinging open, so I just need to gently lift the door up to open it. I don't know about you, but when I think of a jungle, I always imagine thick foliage and vines all over the place. So I'm going to try and recreate this by using these DIY vines. And if you want to learn how to make them, I've linked the video in the description below. And I'm going to be attaching them using my terrarium putty, which I've also linked in this video here. Both are completely animal safe and should help bring together a chaotic jungle vibe. And I think now is a good time to talk about the lighting that I'll be using for this tank. I've got an LED gooseneck lamp here, which I can attach to the canopy and have the neck lead via the hole at the back.
I decided to use some of my jungle vines, having some of them hang across the terrarium and have some directly tied to branches and have them hang down. I attached them using terrarium putty, smoothing it out until I liked how it looked. I then marked the light onto the canopy using a pencil, to which I hot glued small brackets to help keep the light centred. I also attached a small bracket to help guide the neck of the light out the back. Before planting, I added a drainage layer of leaker, which I separated using weed blocker. For a substrate, I used my take on a jungle mix, which I made in this video. I added the substrate, sloping it up slightly towards the back and sides. I added small pieces to the small planters in the background to help the moss grow. To plant this build, I'm using a Calathea, 3 air plants which in the end I decided not to use, another smaller but what I think is a Calathea but with broader leaves, some ivy and a crypt. I'm also using an assortment of mosses to preserve a sense of scale, which I showed how to quarantine in this video here. I've also found these boxes are really helpful for rearing small colonies of springtails. I washed all the roots of the plants thoroughly to remove old soil. I planted the taller Calathea in the back and the smaller one just in front for added depth and textural variation. Planted the ivy in the background for more contrast. And then I added moss to the upper branches using green string to secure it. I placed the crypt in the mid-ground to have a pop of colour and to draw the eye in. I proceeded to add more mosses to the branches and to the back and sides of the terrarium, planting it on the putty, which is an excellent growing medium for the moss. I also planted some mosses in the front of the tank, providing some orchid bark for texture before topping it off with some leaf litter and small acorn caps. Finally, the cleanup crew. For this I'm just using springtails, although I'm thinking of adding a small colony of ice pods in the future.
After working on this build for quite a while, I'm really happy with how it turned out. All the plants have started to grow in and there's plenty of new leaves. Also, I'm thinking of adding a small animal, maybe a mantis or a small colony of isopods. So let me know down in the comments what you think, and if you have any questions about anything I might have forgotten to mention, please ask them and I'll make sure to respond. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing.